All right, it looks like we have everyone here. This is the Personnel and Ordinance Committee meeting on July 11th and starting at 12 o'clock. Just wanted to update you all. Lucy included a comprehensive memo on kind of where we're at after the last conversation. So we'll give you guys some updates on kind of our research that we've been doing on the topic. And then so we're talking about RVs in town. And then we want to talk more about the workforce housing and kind of get some consensus out of the committee on kind of what you guys want to see out of workforce housing and RVs, and then going into friends and family. So we weren't able to address that last time. We're hoping that we can this time, but just want to be mindful that we only have an hour to meet today. And then our goal is a direction on what changes you would like to see in the land use code update. These will go to Clarion to include in their next draft. So Lucy, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. So in the memo, I included some code from neighboring communities, or I guess they're really just communities around Colorado. And what we found is that there's a few communities out there that allow for like short-term occupancy for the convenience of visiting families and friends. We weren't able to find a lot of examples of people that allowed for workforce housing to occupy RVs, except for Estes Park. And so they had a really comprehensive, interesting ordinance, and that has kind of been an experiment that they've been working on, and it seems like it is working for them. And so some things to note about their ordinance is that it requires the workforce RV to be occupied on the same property as the owner or someone affiliated with the owner. And then it has requirements for electric, water, and basically just lays out some really clear regulations. So I thought that was kind of an interesting ordinance. And then we also wanted to make you all aware of House Bill 241154, which essentially, there's a lot to it, but for the purpose of this discussion, it essentially requires certain municipalities to allow for accessory dwelling units anywhere where single family homes are allowed. And so Silverton is technically not one of these municipalities, but we will likely opt in as that will bring us more money for affordable housing and to incentivize ADUs. But one thing that bill mentions is that those municipalities it gives them kind of permission to recognize or not recognize RVs as accessory dwelling units. So we thought that this was interesting and we just wanted to bring it up. I think there could be potential benefits of recognizing an RV as an ADU, but there would be, we would need to put a lot of additional regulations on these RVs that wouldn't necessarily apply to accessory dwelling units that are, permanent structures or even like a tiny home situation. So, Gloria and I were just talking about it, and, I think there's a world where we could recognize that as an ADU with a lot of additional requirements or get a pretty similar outcome of just kind of updating our workforce RV ordinance. So before we kind of go through some of the long-term RV occupancy, kind of some of the changes we talked about last time and getting into a little bit more clarification, were there any questions or anything you wanted to note about any of the other communities, RV ordinances, or the House bill?
Yeah, I guess just the first question, do you guys charge currently for your permits for the workforce housing RVs?
No.
The application?
No.
Okay, that was also something interesting I saw in the Estes Park qualifications. They also charge, sorry
to interrupt you. $100 a month.
$100 a month, but they charge like a $50 application fee. So I don't know, I do like the idea of charging for the permit, maybe not a month-to-month basis, but an application fee.
Okay.
It's just something I noticed. And then I also noticed that they don't allow them in residential zoning as well, which was interesting. I do like the idea of the owner being affiliated with the business that the employee is working at. But I'd also love to hear what you guys think on that one as well. But yeah, Estes Park was just the one that stood out to me. It was super comprehensive, really outlined and just, it allows it, but it's just very detailed and it gives more clarification.
Is this like an exhaustive list? Like, these are the only communities you could find? I mean, I'm sure you didn't check every single one, but.
Yeah, do you wanna?
Oh, yeah. So what I did was I reached out on our manager's listserv for CML and asked for, any kind of policies surrounding this. So this is what I received back from our managers.
CML.
Yeah, our CML listserv.
I would say that
So no, it's not exhaustive.
the campers and RVs are not permanent structures, so you reference them as permanent, but they would be still temporary. Correct?
I reference them as permanent?
You did when you were talking, you call them permanent structures.
I think I said they're, if we were to recognize them as ADUs, we'd have to create regulations that are different from like a permanent structure ADU.
Okay.
Because they're not permanent structures. Yeah.
I like the idea of an application fee, and I don't necessarily think that 100 a month is
Yeah.
unreasonable
Yeah.
for that option. I mean, we don't even know whether or not the properties that they're on are getting billed to the extent that they're using, correct? It's water and sewer.
Especially without sewer too. I think John mentioned last time too, sometimes they'll dump at the RV sites, but then town doesn't really see any of those fees
Yeah.
back.
But it still goes into our sewer plant.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
So I'd be in support of that for sure.
Em?
Hello. Yes, I'm in full support 100%, and I think I've said this before, that we need some sort of registration process. If there's a fee associated with that, I think that's terrific. We need that. There needs to be something that's either fixed on the trailer, color coded, saying that it's what business they affiliated with, what category they're associated with, whether they're family, long-term, short-term. I just think it's smart so that we can differentiate who's parking where. The only thing that I have a little bit of additional thought, which causes me to pause a little bit, is with regards to requiring full taps for these seasonal temporary work housing units, because once you require full taps, then you might as well just call it an RV park, because that's essentially what it is. So that causes me a little pause. That makes me want to think a little bit more about this. I know that when we initially went about this and then renewed it several times, it was pretty well written and it was pretty strict. Obviously, in the last year, 2 years, folks have taken advantage, and I think that's just where we're at. And then now we're having to revisit it and lock it down. But I don't want to punish individuals that are doing it correctly and doing it the right way, because there are individuals that are not. And since this is a situation that almost all the business owners are having to deal with, I think there's a really, there is a good way to do this that everyone will come out feeling like they've won. And obviously some people that have created mini RV parks on their private property, and that are not workforce housing, those people need to be held accountable, and those folks need to go away. Or find actual RV parks that they can spend the summer in. But as far as the original question of charging for permits, having permits in the units, having to come into town hall and register, I think these are all incredible ideas, and I think we should jump on it 100%.
I would have to agree with Jim as far as like requiring taps. I think that we could get into some pretty, I don't really like the idea of putting taps in, an extra tap in just for an RV, a temporary RV housing. But if they're getting water from the house and they're dumping at an RV site, then it makes sense to charge a registration fee and a monthly fee to cover some of those utilities at the very least. You know, the registration fee covers your admin, but that ongoing monthly fee would cover some of your water, wastewater expenses. So that, I kind of like where that's going. I definitely would like to stay away from adding taps, because I think that's not a great idea.
Yeah, and for context, we don't add taps for accessory dwelling units. They're just.
Right.
From they're metered separately, but they are connected to the primary structure's taps, right, John?
Yes. And I'm not against, I'm not proposing that you put a separate meter on these things.
Right.
I don't think they're going to use a lot more water, but the owner of that property is going to get metered for that water anyway.
Totally. Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like we want to do more of a, maybe like a more stringent registration process. Maybe we include, would you guys be open to doing like a full site plan review? So like it goes through planning and building and we review where the RV is to be located on the property. So that it's not too close to the primary structure, it's not too close to a propane tank. And then we charge a fee for the registration. Does that sound like what you guys are thinking?
And what about setbacks?
Yeah, and setbacks. Yeah.
And then I did notice in Estes Park, also the Lake City, they don't Lake City doesn't allow generators for RVs. So like the Estes Park, you can have your own, you don't need a sewer tap or water, you can have your own black water system, but you do have to connect your electric to the primary owner.
It expressly prohibits generator use.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, so that's one thing that maybe like not a whole, do you need a whole nother tap just to hook up to the electric of the?
No.
Okay.
They would just run a power cord.
Yeah, so like something like that, maybe it could be something I'm interested to explore, but.
I think having a registration fee will make it easier for me to set a deadline on when they have to be registered. Or within when they get there, a week. And then it'll be easier for me to justify summoning them or citation for not being registered. And because we're looking at it from the standpoint of impact on town utilities. And if they have a problem with, well, I've been doing this for years, and say, well, I'd notify all the business owners for regarding workforce housing. And then we have to address, relatives, family that are staying in RVs at residences as well, because I think they too are impacting the utilities. So we have to, there's a registration for them too.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if we can compartmentalize the two for make it like two different discussions.
Yes.
Because the employee housing is needed,
Yeah.
right? That's a need.
Yeah.
And friends and family is more like a want. So yeah, if we can keep them separate, I think that would be helpful. If we're done with employee housing.
We still have a couple more follow-up questions on,
Okay.
on employee housing.
Yeah. So I think another thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about last time was, the owner of the property, that's hosting the RV. Can they, right now, we don't really have any, regulations on charging for that RV to be there. And so one thing we were wondering is if you would be interested in creating a regulation on either whether or not a property owner could charge to have an RV, or creating like a limit saying, you know, it has to be affordable with however we want to come up with that definition.
So Lucy and I got into a deep conversation about this and thinking about, you know, there are people that are trying to rent out their own RVs on their property and saying this is for workforce housing. And our concern there is that with a building, you can give a CO and we know that it's a safe and habitable building. But for an RV, what is our inspection process there to make sure that that's safe? Or should it be that person's own RV that is allowed on that property? Like that's where we were kind of thinking of if they would be responsible for if the worker had their own RV, then, and it's on that person's property, then it's not really a rental situation as far as like the building or like the residence, it's more of like the land space. So wanted to kind of bring that issue up to you all for discussion.
Because it's already happening.
Yeah.
Like you're saying that the property owners are renting space to people that bring their own RVs.
Well, no, they're actually renting their RVs
Oh, okay.
as workforce housing on their land.
Okay.
Yeah, and both things are going on. So
Yeah,
it's kind of two
and-
questions. So can someone rent out a space for someone to bring in their own RV if they qualify for workforce housing? And can a property owner rent that property owner's personal RV to workforce housing?
On their property.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's already, are most of them right now, the permits you have, people bringing their own RVs in, or are most of the permits you have already an existing RV? It's the property owners and they're renting it.
Do you know the answer to that?
I'd say most are brought in.
Most are brought in.
We don't have permits though, right now, do we?
We do have,
Yeah,
Okay,
for work.
we do.
but not everyone's doing it. So, you know, it's a lot of the old mentality of, well, we never had to do it before. Why do we have to do it now? Well, that may be their response until it's someone else on their property and they're getting the complaint. So, I have a problem with the landowner or homeowner renting out their own RV. I just, and I have
Stop
one.
people from everyone bringing their RVs in, getting in and saying, okay, hey, these are rentals now.
Yeah, or can we regulate it to keep it affordable?
Yeah.
We want to, or is it possible? Is it legally possible for us to regulate that?
Yeah.
Other than saying no, we could say no.
Right.
And just throw stuff out there, but sticky.
Yeah, that seems to like open a whole can of worms if we're saying, okay, we're gonna regulate this and then.
Right.
How do we, certify that they're habitable structures and then how do we control that people aren't, charging exorbitant rent, et cetera?
Right.
One approach with this is we just make it a requirement, and part of the permit process is having the owner or the business sign off on it. But if we require that workforce housing be signed off on by the owner of the business and verifying it, it would help in controlling who's staying, who's renting those RVs or staying in them. Does that make sense?
It attaches a brick and mortar, and I like that. I
That was
like
another-
that.
The brick and mortar, so a structure on the building.
So yeah, you're attaching the RV to the brick and mortar.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, yes.
And with the registration process, again, it professionalizes it in a way that it's not like a free permit that we're issuing. We're requiring, when money's handled, it ups the level of responsibility on both parts.
Absolutely.
I think a question that I have is, okay, I think that we could regulate these things with the registration permit, at least to an extent. There could be stuff going on under the table that we don't know about, but we can say, okay, these are the rules that we have. But the question that I have is how permissive do we want to be with this? You know, how permissive do you want to be with it? How many RVs do we want to make it as permissive as possible so that we have more housing? Because if that's the case, then I think we could solve these problems of, you know, you could let a property owner rent their RV, or you could let them rent their land. And that way you have the maximum amount of permissibility to get workers in RVs and living in Silverton affordably. That's one way you could go with it. Or you could be more restrictive and say, well, we don't want RVs all over the place. So I think that's part of the question that I would have for the trustees.
I think for me, I'm in support of hooking up to an electrical source. So for workforce housing, I'm personally not the biggest fan of allowing it on just vacant land. So I would lean towards being a bit more restrictive. In that sense, in the fee and hooking up to an electrical.
Like saying that they have to have water and power at a minimum at that site.
Or,
And
yeah,
it's not just.
And a structure on that site, like
like an existing structure on that site already. To hook up to an electrical source. So
Electrical.
I just don't love the generators. I've had people camping and using the generators all throughout the night, and I don't know, that's my stance on it, but
Here in town,
here in town.
right now?
Last year, the vacant lot right behind.
Okay, if it occurs at all this year, let me know.
Okay.
And then going back to your point earlier, Amy, about zoning, you could be fully permissive in some zones
True.
and more restrictive in other zones.
That is true, like residential R1, R2 being more restrictive as it's mainly for residential.
Yep.
Maybe being more permissive in other zoning areas. I don't know, yeah.
Carl, do you have any thoughts on that?
I really appreciate the points everybody's bringing up. I think that I'm in favor of requiring in those residential zones, requiring this to be on a lot that has an occupied structure.
occupied, okay.
Yeah,
We've talked about that too, vacant versus occupied structure.
That's come up this year,
right.
and I'm in support of that as well. I think it opens up a can when there's no structure on the property and it's not supporting residential development.
Jim, do you have thoughts on that topic? Vacant versus.
Yeah, I have to ask the question only because of my own ignorance, and I can say that. I probably don't get out enough. Where, do you have an example? So I can picture that in my head? Of where people are utilizing vacant land to park workforce housing?
Sure. 16th and Cement.
Okay.
It's actually Animus and Cement. It's a blank lot behind, basically right on the river, and the homeowner or the owner of the property. I was notified that there was 10 on the property, and then there was a porta potty from brought in, made them take the tent down. Then the next week there was a tiny home on the property, and apparently his son was staying in that tiny home. He was also staying in a fort in the middle of Animus Street, basically down on the river. that kids from that area had worked on. So there's an example. Across the way, Ken Bowden has a lot that doesn't have a home on it that has 4 RVs on it. He technically
Right.
owned 5 lots, so he could have he could have 5 motorhomes or RVs on those 5 lots, as well as Steve Pendleton having 4 lots. What, your hand is raised?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, my question was with vacant lots that were just people willy-nilly parking workforce housing on vacant lots. I think the argument for, and I don't want to pick on Steve Pendleton, but I think we have established that he's an example that we're using. So I can say that. And Ken Bowden, obviously being in that neck of the woods, those lots are run continuous for Bowden. And it has been established that those are workforce housing units. So that to me is another separate example, separate argument. My question, and again, I said pleading my ignorance because I don't get out enough, is where are there vacant lots in town that people are, I guess, just essentially dry camping that are not affiliated or associated
No, I
with
have not.
anybody or anything.
I've not seen anyone doing that.
Okay.
Visiting, I've seen.
I saw someone yesterday staying on the property of a resident that's building a home in process.
Right.
And, and I hope that it was related to the owner of that property. And I quickly was told that he was, and then, in that case, it's allowable. But that's part of my concern is that I'm not, we have the registration so that, and I like your idea of a carded tag or something that's visible. I require that they post the permit in a window that's visible to the public.
100%.
If it's not, then I'm completely happy to hunt down those that don't have that in place and summons them. And I'm tired. I'm done with being nice, and they need to think about it before they come into town.
I do want to recognize we have Karen Peterson on Zoom, and she's had her hand up. So
Okay.
it is up to the committee on how you all would like to handle that. Typically, we do not take public comment in work sessions, but we have been very lenient on that in the past.
I don't have a preference.
I'm happy to take a comment. I think if we can limit it to 3 minutes like we do in a normal public meeting.
Okay. Karen, I'm going to allow you to talk. You should be able to unmute yourself and.
Okay.
There you are.
I'm very sorry. I didn't realize that this was not going to be open for residents to be able to speak. Anyway, I do have a few quick questions. I live at 1603 Cement Street, and Ken lives directly to the east. Steve lives to the northeast on Mineral and 16th and Cement. When I see the mess they have this year, it is really disgusting to me. They have wires, they have hoses, they have a makeshift electric pole in between the RVs that they have there. Over on Steve's property, it's not only his mess, but now he has accumulated RV mess. And then on the very corner where they have an RV, they have actually a blue barrel there that I believe is catching their sewer. And they're not having it pumped out I think that somebody needs to probably go and take a look at that just to verify that that's what it is. But when I walk around that corner, it reeks of sewer. And then when you guys were speaking about the vacant lots, yes, there are vacant lots behind the 16th and Cement Street. I can't remember who the folks are that own it, but I believe they live in Arizona. And so there are vacant lots there, and there was a porta potty there for the past 3 weeks. Now, I don't know if it's still there. And then the folks that are living right there on the corner of Cement and 16th on the south side, right across from me, I believe that they are renting like a trailer or something back there to somebody. And I don't know if it's something that has gone through to the town or not. And I also have questions as far as the water, sewer, and trash. They haul that trash. That trash is actually, I would consider during those 4 months or 5 months that those folks are there, I would consider that almost a commercial, because it's not just one family now, or it's not just a family having, a few people come and visit them during the summer vacations. It is permanent residence for 4 to 5 months. So I do believe that there's something there. The permit application, I think, is really great. I do think that as far as Estes Park goes, when they said that they don't allow residential people to stay on the residential properties that are zoned residential, I am in agreement to that, because if it ends up getting so out of hand, people are not going to really want to live in Silverton when all they have to look at is RV parks. And that's what I have right now. So anyways, with that being said, thank you. You gave me 3 minutes and I truly appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Karen.
your comment.
Piggybacking off of what Ms. Peterson just said, is this vacant lot on Cement and 16th the one that you were talking about, Bevan?
Yes,
Okay,
I believe
so
so.
this isn't like a separate example. Okay,
It's a separate example. It's one that I brought up regarding the porta potty and tiny home and tent.
perfect.
And yeah,
Thank you, sir.
welcome.
So I think going back to the last question was, should long-term RV occupancy by the local workforce be allowed on vacant land? And we got a no from Amy and from Carl. And I think, Jim, I'm interested to see what you think, or if this is a subject that needs to go out of the P&O committee.
Lost Jim.
Maybe, yeah.
Jim.
You might have just gone to the restroom or something.
Okay. Well, while we wait for Jim to come back.
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm here.
Oh.
I think I'm here. Sorry.
Did you catch that last?
Nope, I didn't.
Sorry.
There was
So
a tapping at my door. I apologize. I have no privacy. None.
so I think going back to that last question was, should long-term RV occupancy by local workforce be allowed on vacant land? And we got a no from Amy and a no from Carl. And Jim, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, or if the P&O committee thinks that this should be a topic addressed at a larger scale, perhaps with the Board of Trustees.
I'm 50-50 on it. I can see and I agree with aspects of what Carl and Amy are saying. But I also, as someone that's cannibalizing my own inventory, income producing inventory, recognize the necessary need for housing in any way, shape, or form. So I'm really 50-50 on it. Which is why I think regulating it, looking into the situation deeper, regulating it and following up with a permitting process would hold people accountable and get rid of a lot of the bad apples.
I do think also, if we- sorry, continue, Jim.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, if we do decide that there's gonna be some kind of a site review as a part of the permitting process, then that maybe addresses some of the issues with the vacant land use too. If there's also a site review on, you know, these vacant land RVs.
Yep.
You know, how they're parked, how they're set up, and importantly, where are they getting their water and power from?
I think that's important. I think too many light duty extension cords could easily start a fire and present a whole nother problem for us. So I think regulating that, I'm in full support of that. It'll force those that want to have workforce housing on their property, put in some infrastructure of their own and investment to verify it. And that way, and I'll have a better idea of who's set up for it. So if I see an RV set up that is an area where I know it's not registered, not adequate supply, then it'll be easy for me to spot it and correct them.
Just to throw out a vacant land thing really quickly, I mean, it is common in the RV world for people to boondock with their RVs off grid. And they have a water tank, they have a black water tank, they have batteries. They could be set up on vacant land without access to any utilities and then resupply as needed.
Right.
Use a headlamp, whatever. I mean, a lot of kids, if you will, young people are pretty resilient and they don't need much to camp off grid, even if it was in a tent, right? And that could be something that could take place on vacant land without utilities. But if this is just another thing I'm throwing out there, but you would still charge them. You know, you would charge them like you would charge anyone else because they're still getting water in Silverton somewhere. They're still recharging their batteries potentially on someone else's power, and they're dumping their black water somewhere or using the restroom somewhere. So that it's possible that you could include vacant land without having utilities. It's just a possibility. I'm not saying that's what you want to do.
I mean, I can be in agreement with that, as like Carl and Bevan said, with the site review attached, kind of case by case, you're reviewing everything in the application.
The problem with that is the code specifically states for workforce housing, no tents, no teardrops, no vans. So we need to get this cleaned up if that's the direction we're gonna go in. I kind of don't feel like that's a good move because we need to be encouraging development in residential areas. I'm not, you could bring up Anvil. I'm not a fan of the fact that we've got this long-term build process out there. I think that, and that coincides with allowing people to tent or be in an RV on vacant land and not be building. So we got two paths that are going to be contradictory to one another. And I think we need to choose and get behind that.
Thanks for that, Bevan. I just want to make a quick time check. We got 20 minutes.
Thanks.
Yeah, Bevan, you did bring up a really great point. I mean, one of our biggest issues that keeps coming up is housing and affordable housing and more housing, right? And if we do just allow all vacant land for long-term housing and long-term workforce employment, I fear that, again, that will stop us from creating spaces for long-term residents to live in and town to thrive in that aspect.
Yeah. I saw a neighbor using our dumpster the other day.
Yeah.
When I think about it, it's like, it's all going to the same place and they're all paying their fees, but we have a system, we have a certain size dumpster for what we know we need. When people start adding to that, it affects the infrastructure and our plan. So, you know, in the case, I know that people can boondock, but they might be making it more difficult for the whole system to function and not allow us to plan for what we need.
That's true. So I'm wondering what Carl and Jim think. We want to bring this up to the Board of Trustees to discuss in like a deeper conversation, get more minds on this, or what do we think?
I think eventually we'll need to, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
This has always been a bridge. It's never been a permanent fix. It's always been a temporary, which is why it's renewed year over year. I aspire as a Silvertonian to permanent housing, to affordable permanent housing for all. But knowing that is, and knowing our efforts as a town board, as the governing body of our community for the past however many years, I know it takes time. So this has been a bridge from where we've been to where we're going to go. So nothing is set in stone and nothing is permanent. So I do, again, and this is why I've written down Miss Peterson's information. I would love to go visit with her personally to talk to her about this. Because I do understand the pitfalls of what we've walked into while we're on our way to creating permanent structures for our community. But what we're doing right now is trying to be mindful of the needs and wants of our community and for that large segment of our community that does not have permanent housing, which is why I'm trying to look at every option and saying, I'm not willing to say no to anything at this point, but I am willing to have healthy discussions. And I think that is really my absolute statement on this topic, because it is a difficult one for all of us. And I don't want to say no to any things. I want to be smart about this and look at all the options before we go to absolutes with regards to this bridge that we've created as a community to get from where we've been to where we're going. So Amy, to answer your question, I'm open to anything, and I'm not willing to close the door on any discussion. So I've always been that way. I really do try to look at every angle and come up with the best decision, and while trying to take everyone's feelings and thoughts into consideration. And I do want to thank everyone, including Karen Peterson, who's on here, for her thoughts and feelings, and obviously her observations. Because like I said, this is a really good program and a necessary program. And if it's not done correctly, can spiral out of control. And I think that's where we're teetering at the moment, is spiraling out of control. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, so I think that our thoughts is we could take this discussion and give it to Clarion and have it addressed in our land use code update. It goes to the community via the next draft. Or if we feel that this is a conversation that is that needs to be elevated to the board before it goes to Clarion, we can do that too. I have a few more rapid fire questions, if that's okay with you guys. Okay. Next question. What should the maximum number or density of RVs on vacant land be if we're interested in allowing RVs on vacant land? It sounds like we want to regulate them. Do you guys like the idea of doing like a density percentage according to the area of land, or do you like an ultimate maximum number, whether that's 1 or 3, regardless of how big the piece of land is?
Know that currently code dictates 1 per 2,500 square feet, assuming there's a structure on that property.
And this is just in reference to workforce.
Just workforce.
Yes, and family right now.
Right.
Just talking workforce.
One per lot,
One per 2,500 square foot lot.
one per city lot, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's it. That feels appropriate. I totally agree that this is like, it's a difficult situation because we want to create as many options for people as possible, but I do think that part of making this something that's digestible and feels like there are options is communicating it really clearly. And I think something as simple as, you know, a single RV per given land area and 2,500 feels reasonable. I think that's straightforward, that's understandable, and that feels good.
Yeah, I mean, just for workforce housing for that summer employment, I do agree with that, Carl. Like if we're talking friends and family though, I did like Lake City's ordinance where they have, it says it shall not involve more than one travel vehicle at a time. When visiting friends and family. I think those are two different things we can discuss.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have time to get to friends and family today. But we can definitely do that in a future meeting.
Would you all be okay with us continuing these conversations at another P and O committee meeting prior to going to the board, just so that we have
Yes.
friends and family kind of addressed and can kind of at least hone in on this one a little bit before we bring it to the Board of Trustees?
Absolutely, because it is such a complex
It is.
that we're talking about that it seems like 1 hour does not even cover that.
Okay, I'll have to compliment you guys. It seems like you're really making a lot of headway here. So congratulations on that. It is a tough subject.
All right. I'm open to continuing it with the P and O committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think this rises to the level of a discussion we should have with the whole board. But I think that we need to talk it out a little bit more so that we have both sides considered.
Or at least get to friends and family.
Yeah. Like all of a sudden, we'll start throwing out scenarios at each other and be like, oh, shoot, we didn't. Let's reconfigure this, but.
And I would encourage that we submit it, that we share it with the full board.
Yeah.
So that it's a big enough topic that I
Absolutely.
think we've got to take a little bit of time right now to nail it down and give it to Clarence.
I agree.
What, did you want to do some more questions?
No, we can start talking about scheduling.
Scheduling, okay. So, if we don't mind, we could start thinking about maybe the next time we could meet. I know we've got some, I do want Lucy to be present here and I want to respect that she's got a vacation coming up. So I'm looking at, if these noon meetings work or if you feel like we need more time. I'm looking at August 1st.
I will be on vacation.
That's right. Let me pull up that schedule too. All right. Looking at. She will be out. Well, you're out. Okay, now we're looking at the week of August 12th.
I'm free the 13th and the 15th. And the morning of actually, after 4 PM on the 14th as well.
Would the 14th or the 15th in like an afternoon meeting, like a 4 or a 5 work for everyone?
I can make that work.
Yeah, that would work for me. I'd like to have, an hour and a half or even two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably set a 2-hour meeting for our next one, so we can kind of button up these conversations. Does that work for you, Jim? 2 thumbs
Yes,
up.
ma'am.
What's the earliest on the 14th or the 15th that we could schedule? Earliest time in the afternoon.
If it's the 15th, I can go earlier than 4. Just not the 14th. I have a sword committee meeting as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and 3 for me, 3:30.
Okay. Jim, does 3 o'clock on the 15th?
I'll make it work.
All right,
14th.
send out,
15.
Thursday, August 15th.
Thank you.
and I will send out a calendar invite for everyone.
Sweet.
3 PM.
Sorry, Lucy, keep.
And we'll get to friends and
I feel
family.
like this is all conversation and
Really good. Yeah, this is really, really helpful. I feel like this gave us a good idea of
Mhm.
what kind of regulations you want to see.
and looking at the other ones that you provided for us was so helpful for me.
Very
I
much
was
so.
the first one going in and being like, oh, well, I don't know.
So what we'll do is staff will kind of consolidate some of our feedback that we received from this meeting. And see if there's any like move forward items basically from this and then, back to you all and continue this discussion on the 15th.
Great.
Sweet.
All right.
Snail's pace, but we'll get there.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks,
Good. We're
guys.
fine tuning everything, make sure that it's done.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a wonderful rest of your